Okay. Um, you grew up in Miami.
Yeah,
Okay, and you grew up in what, 80s, 70s?
no. Actually, my mom and I and my little brother left New York in '74.
Okay,
Might have
and
been,
then,
might have been '73 actually. So we ended up moving to Miami. The reason why we moved to Miami because that's where my mother spent her teenage years of her life because they used to live in South Carolina, and it was the Holly Hill. Um, I guess you can call. I wouldn't say Branchville, but it's Holly Hill area. And so they were sharecroppers or domestic housekeepers, depending on what at that time the opportunities they actually had. My grandmother and grandfather decided to move, and there was an expansion of moving up north, what they call one of the Great Migrations. What they meant by that, Great Migrations of African Americans looking for a better life, either went up west to California or went up north, Midwest North, Chicago, Detroit areas, and then also the Northeast, like New York.
what year? What year that was?
So you're looking at like uh, early 50s, so
Okay.
1950. So my mom was born the year that um, that World War II ended.
Mhm.
And so
And so okay, so going back to you, you moved with your mom to Miami, what year? Oh, around what?
1973.
And
So yeah, um,
and so you grew up
I
since, and
grew up in Miami. Yeah, I consider myself a Miami boy because you know, um, I mean, I had formative years in New York, but most of my life I remember out of Miami. I remember a lot of New York stuff, but you're a kid then. You know?
right. What was it like to grow up in Miami in the 80s? I guess that would be 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah, it would be the mid '70s and the '80s because I graduated high school in 1983.
Right.
So my formative years, were first at Sunset Elementary, which is in Coral Gables, which is right next to Miami, and because it was a much better school, it was in um, a high economic area, Coral Gables, and I think at the time Star Wars had just came out, and I was leaving from sixth grade to seventh grade when Star Wars just came out, and I think Star Wars came out in 1976. Right. So, you know, and then after that, I went to South Miami Junior High, and then after that, South Miami Senior High School.
What was it? I guess what I want to ask you is, what are some positive aspects? I guess we'll say with positive aspects for African American to have lived in Miami at that time.
Well, it was a lot. You know, before the reign of the cocaine cowboys, which was like the '80s. You basically make say '79, '80s, and you had the people from the Mariel Boat Lift basically coming over. And I don't know if people really realize this, but it's easy to figure out. And you can also look; it's based on history. It's fact. Castro, when Jimmy Carter was here, the president, they were talking about freedom and all this other stuff, and so the Castro regime was considered communist, and so they didn't want somebody 80 miles off of the coast of Florida, which is Key West, and so Castro let all out the people in his prisons, because they were supposedly against his rule, and so they ended up coming to South Florida. Well, a lot of those people they were criminals. A lot of them were criminals, and they ended up getting jobs like as police officers and firefighters and stuff like that. And they ended up basically, people say, oh, they brought a lot of good stuff to Miami. Well, maybe so, but they brought a lot of bad stuff to Miami too, like the advent of, because drugs and stuff like that, you know, because I mean, obviously there wasn't any black people bringing with ships bringing over, you know, drugs, whatever. They were just sold in black neighborhoods. And
So,
so,
wait, so this is, you talking more about the negative?
no, I'm about to tell you about the positive stuff.
Okay.
Um, and so, I have to do that as a counterbalance. So, you know, before then, there was always community, you know, basically interaction. You know, everybody basically knew each other. One thing is that you had a lot of you know, social, what's the word? A social network, social safety net. You know, kids could be, you know, there were no outside influences except for people that love sports or they loved music or arts and stuff like that, or they love learning. And at that time, there was no distraction. So, you know, like it was great for us. We could take our bicycles and ride to the beach. You know, we could take Sunset Drive all the way to Edgewater Drive, or you know, down the very end, what we call the circle. And we could ride into the back way into Coconut Grove, and then ride all the way out to the Key. I mean, the Key Biscayne, and go to one of the beaches that was there.
Mhm.
Um, there were mangrove beaches all up and down, and I think you've been there. Um, Old Cutler Road. You know, remember we were driving and I was showing you all the nice houses on one side and like that, and you know there were mangroves there, and you could just basically ride your bicycle there and jump in the water and swim in the beach. Then we also had a number of brackish water canals, you know, that were near my house, and we would go swimming. But you know, you know, there was some, it was some fraught with dangers, but yet still, we did a lot of stuff that a lot of kids didn't do. We were always outside, you know, we were always doing something. And the race relations then seemed like it was okay. It seemed like as a kid, I think probably our inquisitiveness and us being shielded by our youth, we didn't get all the, you know, negative stuff and the racist stuff, you know. And so I remember, you know, we used to have these cane poles because they were like pretty cheap. And cane poles, we would just go fishing. You know, none of us really ate the fish. We just gave it to people. But, you know, um, go out there and just fish. And, you know, mullet is a fish that people, you know, kind of like, oh, I don't want to have mullet because mullet doesn't taste well. But, you know, it depends on who cooks it. That's one. And I remember, you know, we're picking out one by one, you know, because you have a rod in there, you would throw it in there and the fish would bite on it. But this older white man, you know, gave me, he says, hey man, you guys are doing it all wrong. Gave me a throwing net and showed me how to throw the net. And instead of catching one fish, I ended up catching 20 at one time, you know? So it's a strange thing. You know, I remember there are times we would ride our bicycles all around Coral Gables, South Miami, Coconut Grove, and police never really, they just saw a bunch of kids on bicycles, you know?
Can I ask you about the, I think what's different about Miami, well, different about Miami from other parts of US? What is so unique about Miami as far as its culture?
All right, so if you sit back and think about it, um, you know, just to kind of let you know, I'm gonna just give you the background, my background. You know, like I said, a lot of people left from South Carolina, you know, southern states like Alabama, Mississippi, because they were looking for a better life. Nobody really wanted to be under the yoke of Jim Crow. So, although Miami is like the southern part of the South, if you sit back and think about it, it was always known as like an international city because it had this culture of being like a Barbary coast, you know, and it you had people from the Caribbean like the Bahamians, and they settled Coconut Grove. You know, that's why a lot of Bahamian culture. That's why they have the Goombay Festival. They don't have it now, but they did have it for a long time, and that's why it moved down to Key West. There's a picture that you and I took, and you see it says Bahama on the top,
Yeah.
and you know that's one of the things. Is a lot of African, well, Afro-Bohemians, moved to Miami and South Florida, and they made a lot of marks on the culture.
What can you elaborate? What is Afro-Bohemians?
Black Bahamians, people from the islands of.
Oh, yeah.
You have a mixture of Bahamian culture.
Cuban?
Well, hold on. You have a mixture of Jamaican, Haitian, Cuban, Panamanian, because it's the gateway into South America. It's considered an international city. With the advent of even having Russians there, which is like crazy.
Were there Russians in the 80s? A lot of them, I guess there were.
No,
but
wasn't a
not
lot.
many.
It wasn't a
Yeah.
lot. They were mostly what you would call like, there's a joke that you call them white Russians, and those were like kind of like intellectual, aristocratic Russians that left Soviet Union. But it was,
But not the main. There was
no, they were very few and far in between. It's almost like if you saw one, they were like almost like unicorns. You saw one, and they were mostly the ones that you had that were Russians. They were usually Russian Jews, because they left Russia because of religious persecution, or they just left because of intellectual persecution. Because people with free thoughts basically weren't allowed there.
Okay. I guess there are some negative aspects in that growing up in Miami that you could think of, right? Not everything was perfect.
No, nothing. No, listen, I gotta tell you something. Not everything was perfect. But there was this, I'm gonna say, because I don't think I really answered the question about what was great about it. It was a universe of learning. It's like, you got a chance to meet different people, and because I'm inquisitive, like I like to know and I like to talk to people. And one of the things is that, if you learn about different cultures, you even learn languages, you even learn, what artists or artistes were great in their area. People that came down from New York, what we call snowbirds, they would bring that down. They would bring intellectualism down, and it's not like there weren't any intellectual people there, but it was just a lot of people who allowed people to have their own culture and express it to people. Not that you have to say it's a dominant culture or anything, but it was a good thing to add. When people talk about a melting pot, it's like a ceviche dish. Like you cut some things up, you put it together, and you do this, and then wow, it's like great.
And it tastes good.
And it tastes good.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, it is.
So I guess it sounds like overall you really I guess have good memories of Miami.
I do. And the funny thing about it, the negative aspects, I would say what really started the negative aspects were the drugs. That was basically it. And it wasn't the marijuana. What it is that it was everything like cocaine, stuff like that. That was it. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned names, but nevertheless, we were talking about all the talent that was there. And then we talked about people who sang, I don't want to mention names, but, phenomenal singer.
Right, but you were talking about the effect of drugs, and so that affected the African American community.
Well, hold on. This is like really important. The advent of drugs did, and all those people with talent basically got sucked into the drug culture.